Let me just close this door real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, man. I'm recording now. Just want to verify that I'm recording. So here with my man Tim. So yeah, we are recording, and we're going to talk about the efficacy of burpees. I was trying to actually get a large screen on this for right now, but I wanted to show something on my blog about this a little bit later. But sorry if everybody's seeing a small thing of us here. I thought I was more tech savvy than I am. All right, so real quick, let me just say this. I do want to give Tim a time just to give him a quick introduction. I've always respected his work. He's written 3 books. I think I have one of your books. I know for sure that's like a friggin' encyclopedia. It's a lot. I know what kind of work goes into that. I haven't written 3 books myself, so he's certainly someone who cares a lot about giving back to the field, as a very thoughtful mind that I greatly respect in the field. And I'm going to oversimplify, but I think burpees are a great exercise. Of course, not for everybody, but I certainly think they should be an option that is considered for context. Tim, I know you just sent me a video. You said burpees suck. I don't want to put any words in your mouth. So can you just give your brief, simplified version of burpees? And then we can
Sure. So yeah, if you guys want to learn more about me, just Google me is fine. I'm a big fan of Nick's. We kind of grew up around the same time, wrote a lot for T Nation and other different areas. So he's got, very thoughtful opinions that I respect and appreciate a lot. But on Facebook, there was a little post kind of basically just saying like, I think burpees are, safe, effective, a really good exercise. And I kind of challenge anyone to, to basically take the second, the opposing point of view. And I thought I might be able to kind of put a slightly new spin on there. And then I just made a video, as he mentioned, on YouTube called Burpees Suck. And the idea there is, really the biggest problem in my mind with burpees is it's really challenging your blood flow. So when you're standing, blood is flowing down. You open up your carotid arteries through baroreceptors, sometimes just called baroreceptors for short. And the idea there is that you want blood flow to increase up to your head. But then when you drop into that push-up position, now all of a sudden those things are going to restrict because blood flow flows much easier from your heart to your brain. And if you just do that once or even twice, most people can handle that pretty well. But if you do, 10, 20, 30 of those, really that's what the challenge of the exercise is. So you're having a hard time regulating your blood pressure. That's what the hard feeling is for most people. And for some people, especially people with blood pressure issues and things like that, that would be a pretty big negative. And I don't think then people are training necessarily what they think they're training by doing that. So certainly I wouldn't say a majority, but a significant minority, it's pretty negative. And I do think that there are better options, even if we kind of put that to the side.
Okay, I got you. All right, good. So that's a good starting point. Certainly more of I would say more of an original argument that I've heard relative to some of the other ones about, you're banging your wrist down, it's too much wrist extension.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've read most of your stuff on those things. So, the idea that, wrists are bad. Obviously, if you just drop from a standing position onto your wrist, that's pretty rough. But like you said, that's how you do the exercise. Spinal flexion, how you do the exercise. So I think those are kind of nitpicky and not super strong. But I do think the blood flow is a pretty big issue that people need to consider. And then there are a few other considerations as well.
Perfect. Yeah, I definitely want to address that argument. What I really should have, that's kind of why we do these kind of off the cuff here. I really should have done the screenshot after, the screen share after, so we could be much bigger for everybody. But so here's what I'd like to clarify with everybody who's watching. If you've already watched this far, and the typical Instagram ADD hasn't got you already, and if you think, oh my God, these 2 coaches, what a waste of time talking about burpees. How does that help the industry? It helps everybody, and here's why. Any trainer that's worth their salt has the same policy, and Tim, and I know you agree with this. Obviously, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'm pretty confident you do. Any trainer that's worth their salt has the same policy for themselves and for their employees. And it's this, that you should be able to explain and justify everything you do in training. Tim, would you agree?
I would. I taught my students that a lot at National Personal Training Institute. You've got to be able to, clients should have the right to ask why, and you should then be able to explain it. And I felt like as a teacher, they had the right to ask me, why the hell do I have to learn about the cells, about muscles, things that might seem a little esoteric. And if I don't do a good job explaining why, then, maybe we should reevaluate the curriculum.
Correct. So what you just said right there is how you think about one thing is how you think about everything. Because if you're using flawed premises to come to the conclusion about one exercise, then what does it say about the rest of your exercise selection? You see, we all know this in mathematics. So when I say this, people are like, oh, do coaches just arguing about burpees? Don't you have better shit to do? Well, everything that we do comes down to our decision-making process, and we are exercise providers. When we go to learn and you go get continuing education, you are hoping to learn good rationale that turn into good application. We know in mathematics that we don't teach children in basic addition, just remember 2 + 2 = 4. We say, here's how you work it out. You have 2 here, count it, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, you said 2 + 2 = 5? You don't just say, well, that's wrong, just remember it's 4. You say, show me your work. The reason why you say, show me your work is because you say, if you went wrong somewhere here, it's not just going to be isolated to figuring out 2 + 2 = 4. It's going to carry over to every mathematical problem that involves addition. If you have problematic decision-making processes with how you choose or select or deselect or why, then it's going to carry over to every frigging exercise that you do. And if you care about making better decisions and giving your clients the best, then this is why this helps everybody. We're just using the topic of burpees as a simple thing to put a circle on to talk about much bigger issues. Would you agree on that? Do you have anything to add?
I agree. Yeah. So I like to take exercises and examine them through different lenses, and it essentially highlights your philosophy. Or if you don't have a philosophy yet, then it can help you kind of redefine probably the direction that you want to head in.
Okay, good. Secondly, that's number one. Number two, I'm just going to speak for myself here. I'm certainly not someone, I always like how people kind of like straw man arguments. So they'll, if you defend a certain exercise in a given context, it says like, oh, well, you just think everybody should do them. It's like, well, no, I don't think that about any exercise. So I think any exercise is overused if it's overused, right? I think barbell lifts, you know what I mean? And I'm saying that in general, but also I think you might get a kick out of that because you're a big, power lifter guy,
Sure.
are often very overrated and overused when they're shoehorned in because there's a bias towards barbell lifts. So it's not that I am pro everybody do burpees. The way I look at it is if somebody comes along and says, if I have tomatoes, as an option for my clients to eat as a vegetable, and someone comes along and says, no, tomatoes are dangerous for whatever reason, you read the Tom Brady book and they're a nightshade or some other nonsense,
Right.
or whatever, right? And if I defend that and I say, well, I don't necessarily agree with that. It doesn't mean that I'm saying everybody now needs to eat tomatoes.
You're a big shell for tomatoes. That's right.
Correct. What I'm saying is that maybe my clients like tomatoes and maybe that's a convenient option for them. And maybe you're making things a lot harder for them when their life works in the direction where tomatoes would be an option. And now they're questioning everything. Secondly, is I think a lot of people, and I get it, I get the frustration with the coach versus coach debates. I know it's a topic with people. On one hand, conflicting information is the biggest point of frustration from people who are just trying to continue in their education, right? So we get that, but I can't control what you say. You can't control what I say. You certainly shouldn't try to control what I say. I promise you I'll never try to control what you say. So we're all going to have to deal with that. That's just the beauty of the free market of ideas and intellectual diversity. I would much rather live in a world that has a free market of ideas and intellectual diversity that doesn't. That being said, we have to have tools to be able to filter, kind of like the show me your work.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to be coming to more logical conclusions based on the processes they're using to get there. Now, that being said, one of my biggest issues, and I'm trying to clarify this whole, it's just an ego versus ego sort of thing that I see. I'm all about live and let live, train and let train, mind your own business type of person. However, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. When someone gets online and they say, hey, I just want to share with you what I do and why I don't do this exercise. We think burpees don't really make a lot of sense because they're commonly done wrong, and some people slam the wrists or something to do with the blood flow or whatever. What you're doing when you say it that way, notice I said, if you trained with us, we don't do it this way. What you're doing is you're acknowledging I'm just one asshole with one opinion. Sure, I might have a big resume and written a lot of books, but guess what? For every PhD, there's an equal and opposite PhD, and for every expert, there's an equal and opposite expert, right?
Right.
So we can't use these. I'm just getting in a little logical rant here, but we can't use the whole, well, someone has success and a big resume, therefore they are right, because I can find someone else with just as much of a resume, with just as much success, who says completely mutually contradictory things. All right. So you can't remain logically consistent with that. Now, my issue is when somebody just says, that's a dumb exercise. Now I get we're in the land of attention and quick sound bites. For a title of an article, I totally get it. Just to get attention. I get that part of it. I'm all about marketing. But however, when that's kind of followed along with no, it's just a dumb exercise, like universally, that has implications, because it basically throws slime on anybody like me if I got that exercise in a book,
Sure.
if I'm teaching a course. So I'm no longer being able to someone is no longer letting me train at that point, right? They're not minding their business nor respecting my time, nor are they demonstrating open-mindedness that they could be wrong. They're basically saying, I've considered every possible argument and there is no way around it. This is just a dumb exercise. To me, that is the height of lack of humility, i.e. arrogance, and intellectual, or I would just say closed-mindedness, right? So that puts me in a situation where I go, no, wait a minute now. If I don't say anything, I look like I don't have an answer. And if I do say anything, now I'm talking trash, right? But I'm not the one who spoke irresponsibly. So the reason why I bring it up, and I said, look, I'll challenge anybody, is because when I'm teaching courses and I'm constantly getting these questions, and it's diverting the way I do things because of the way some people speak, right? So me, I'm just basically like, hey, look, I'm sick of people talking with so much arrogance about this when I look at their reasons and they're not very good. So yeah, it is an ego thing. It's all the ego on the people who are making direct claims as if they're not just one person with one opinion. Right. So that's why I appreciate you willing to do this, and we can, have this conversation. So we'll get into it. I just want to say, do you want to add anything to anything I just said there before we start getting into brass tacks?
No, I think that all sounds pretty good.
Perfect. So there are really two sort of big pillars to the anti-burpee / pro burpee argument. And one is it purposeful, and what's the purpose, right? What's its use or efficacy, yep. I guess. And the other one is safety, right? It's a dangerous exercise. Well, maybe it's not. Okay. The safety argument is a very big umbrella, because there's everything from argument, like you said, from a blood flow issue to some people say it's bad on your wrist. And I agree with you. You don't necessarily agree with all those anti-burpee arguments, which I think is good. I'm the same way. I've seen some pro-burpee arguments that I go, that's a horrible argument. So we're going to first address the purposefulness of it, or the context, right? We all say it's all about application. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to ask you first, do you think there is any context? And maybe we have some common ground on that.
Okay.
And then I'll provide some of my, rationale, and we'll talk about that, because that's a big argument. What's the purpose of it? And also that would cover the whole, I think there are better options. Cool. So let's cover that first, and then what'll take us the full time mainly is the safety issue. So in regards to efficacy, I guess I'll ask you directly, and then you can just carry on from there. Do you think there is any efficacy to using a burpee, purposefulness to it?
Yes, there can be. And so in the video that I mentioned, to me, it may be appropriate. So let me just give it just a tiny bit of history. So a guy named Royal H. Burpee is actually the inventor of the burpee, and he was trying to assess people's cardiovascular fitness. This is way back in 1939. And so he figured out, okay, well, if we kind of mess up somebody's metabolism or mess up their physiology a little bit by changing their position and altering their blood flow, we can then assess and have an idea of what their cardiovascular fitness is. And so he would have people do 4 kind of what we would call, I think you call them like gorilla burpees or kind of traditional burpees. So there's no push up, there's no jump. You just drop down into the top of a push up and you stand up. And so he was able to get a reasonable assessment and predict cardiovascular fitness there. I personally think he was really getting a correlation between your ability to regulate your blood pressure and your ability to have reasonable cardiovascular fitness. But there are going to be people that need to change your position and still function well. You know, the first example that pops in my head is soldiers. And that's one of the reasons why burpees became super popular is right after this guy did his tests, World War II came about, and, you know, the military is always looking for ways to get people fit, and they don't have, you know, machines, and you got 100 people in a field. So the burpee suddenly seems to make a lot of sense. And then, of course, you can modify and add push-ups and jumps and all that. Although in World War II, they didn't really do the push-ups and the jump much. But anyway, so I think for some people, if you really need to function by getting on the ground, getting back up, and still having this blood pressure, whether it's to run around, you know, it's not with a client. If they have high blood pressure, I don't need to make them do burpees. I have a million choices. But with a soldier, they don't get to just tap out and be like, hey, I'm feeling kind of dizzy, I'm going to sit on the side while we go in battle. So they may need to have that ability. Pilots perhaps may need that, you know, if they're flying around with high Gs. I'm not an expert on those things, but I'm just kind of hypothesizing. Gymnastics or gymnasts may need those kind of things. So if you feel like you need to be able to regulate your blood pressure while you're changing your position, avoiding what's called orthostatic hypotension, then it's probably a pretty pertinent exercise.
And what would you be, because I would say definitely physiology is my weakest point. How would you know that you were starting to get into that hypotension? Would be causing dizziness and?
So dizziness, you know, the heart can feel like it's just kind of slamming, even though the muscles, you don't have the same level of kind of like muscle fatigue that you might. Let's say you rode a bike for a mile just as hard as you could. You're still going to have some, you know, kind of fatigue. It's not so much an oxygen. The face may turn red. You start to get the tunnel vision, and then obviously, you know, basically it's just the window before you pass out, right? Is when that. So most of our audience has probably felt at some point, you know, if you jump up from a lying down position, you know, you kind of just feel just like a little woozy and a little iffy. So really this is just kind of taking that to the extreme. And some people tolerate that pretty well. Some people are much more sensitive to it. Typically, the older you get a lot more sensitive to it.
Sure. So I think that was an awesome explanation. So, and I would say that my thing there, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I would say, you know, I've had people that got dizzy doing push-ups, doing squats, doing Romanian deadlifts. And if that happens, I go, this is not a good exercise for you, right? So that may be at the crux. Again, I'm not putting words in your mouth here, but I find that a lot of the anti-burpee arguments are kind of come down to I'm going to make a point. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. They might say, well, because people, I'm just going to piggyback off what you said, because people can have this sort of hypotension issue because of this, you know, regulation of blood flow, that it's a bad exercise. And I might say, well, you know, I've had people get dizzy, you know, doing other exercises. Would you say I shouldn't do that exercise with anybody then? Is it bad? You would say, no, you just don't do it with them. And I go, yeah, that's how I look at the burpee.
Right.
You know, so I would say if someone is using that as an example of one way to say, don't do this exercise for this person, I would say, fantastic. I'm consistent with that thought on every other exercise. But if somebody is inconsistent with the thought and uses that thought because it makes some people dizzy, you know, therefore nobody should do it, I would say, well, why don't you apply that to other exercises then? And that kind of, I find that my whole argument seemed to come back to that. I don't see consistent logic. Now, please correct me if I'm not saying that is your logic, but what would you say to that there?
I would say I would kind of agree. I guess we'll focus on what I don't agree with, which would be usually the exercise, whatever you're doing, the limiting factor kind of rears its ugly head. So for example, someone may say, oh, I want to train my lats, and I read about doing a 1-finger pull-up. And so I'm going to go train my lats doing a 1-finger pull-up. Well, unless you're crazy, rock climbing strong,
Right.
the lats aren't going to get a good workout because your grip is going to give way first. So that's not really a lat exercise. You're working other stuff. So
Right.
my argument would be for the burpee, the thing you're really challenging is your ability to control your blood pressure. And so unlike other exercises where certainly people can get dizzy doing all sorts of stuff, and obviously look at their form and honestly, that may be time on a standard exercise, they may need to go see a doctor if that's like a regular thing. There's a good article on the skeptical cardiologist who talks a little bit more about how burpees affect blood pressure. And his point was a 60-year-old who was super fit was sent to him by his trainer because he had him do 30 burpees, and the guy, staggered around and almost passed out. And so the trainer was like, oh, you should go, see a doctor. And the doctor was like, no, in this instance, you don't need to see a doctor because what you did was designed to get you dizzy and almost pass out. If you were doing a more normal exercise, then that would be kind of an issue. So if you were in a normal position and someone's getting dizzy, then certainly for that individual, yeah, let's modify, let's try to alter. But I would argue that with the burpee, that's really what it's designed to do. So it's designed to really challenge your blood pressure. So if that's your goal, great. If not, then that may not be the choice for you.
Sure. That's interesting. I mean, the doctor stories, to me, I get it. I mean, people like social proof. That just means anecdotal evidence, but, for every one of those, there's doctors that'll say, don't do deadlifts because I see so many patients that deadlifts hurt their back. Right. Of course, us trainers, and this, again, it goes back to consistent logic. When we hear that, because we like deadlifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
We like deadlifts. So what we do is we try to find reasons that we would use them. We would say, well, that could be because they didn't do them right, because they did too many of them. They did them too heavy. They didn't know how to program them. They went too far in the range of motion. We give the deadlift the benefit of the doubt, right? We blame the user. We don't blame the tool.
Mm-hmm.
But every time we hear something done improperly, we blame, with a burpee, we always blame the tool.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it comes down to. We also don't know the rest of that story with the trainer. We don't know if that was the 4th set of 30, right? You know what I mean? So we don't know if that was after a full workout where the trainer had him run 5 miles and do some crazy, female named CrossFit workout, right?
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting to me how we're able to judge this exercise because for whatever reason, and that, again, that's my thing. It seems to be, I'm not saying this is you,
mm-hmm.
but it seems to be a lot of motivated reasoning with the burpee, and here's why. I see the same thing with the hip thrust.
Right.
And here's what happens. Trainers get sick of seeing people abuse an exercise. So they just go, you know what? They take out their frustrations towards the abuse. So they just say, I see so many programming aspects abused with this exercise. So you know what? I'm just going to say, don't do the exercise. Right? Now I get that. However, to me, that's also insulting on other people because it's basically saying just because some people can't figure out how to use this right, none of you can. You're all dipshits, but you know who's not a dipshit? Me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I always love when trainers go, well, people will see this and they'll just do it wrong. And it's like, well, you figured out that it wasn't right. What makes you think anybody else won't figure it out, smarty pants? Why are all of a sudden you the arbiter? Everybody needs your genius to tell them what to do. And you see what I mean? The arrogance of it, and the amazing thing to me is it's flipped when someone like me goes, wait a minute now, I'll debate you on this because your reasons aren't that good. Everybody looks at me like I'm the asshole. Like, wait a minute.
You're like, I'm not trying to be an asshole. Right.
I was just putting my shit out there. Someone's throwing slime on my shit now. And I'm just, you know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, to me, I look at it when somebody does that. I was a strength coach for an MMA school for 10 years. To me, I look at it no different. We're not walking around talking shit about other MMA schools.
Right.
But someone else walks around and goes, oh, that school over there, ground control, they don't know what they're doing. We'll go, all right, come on in.
Right, yeah.
Let's
check things out.
When I say debate, I go, okay, if you're that, cocky. Now, again, you're not somebody who's been putting yourself out there, but there's there's definitely some strength coaches out there. And I say this
Mhm.
now, it's not just Mike Boyle. I know a lot of people know Mike Boyle, but this is not some passive aggressive me going after, Mike. There's a lot of strength coaches in college that teach for colleges or whatever. I go to conferences all over the world for years. This is commonly said.
Right.
So the reason why I said I'm not calling people out in that post, and a lot of people say this, is because I don't challenge individuals. I challenge ideas.
Right.
It wasn't about this. And I would never disrespect somebody's body of work by saying you're the anti-burpee coach. People like Mike Boyle deserve a hell of a lot better than to be thought of. They've done a hell of a lot more for this field than to be thought of that way.
Mhm.
So it's disrespectful of me, of all their body of work and all their achievements and all the things I've learned from them, to relegate them to that, Okay. Now, here's what I'm going to do. Like I said, I really should have done this after, but shows my lack of tech, even though you think I'd be better at this. Just for some context, I wanted to show two things, that way everybody can see the screen, and then I'll take off the screen share and we can go big there.
All right. Nice.
Just
Keep
for
up
some
this plan.
context, is I have tweaked the burpee, and I call it the Gorilla Burpee. This is a picture taken from one of my books. So what I've done basically, and I've got a bunch of videos on this people can watch, but what I've done is really two things. Instead of the feet coming behind the hands, we have the hands going inside the feet. You can obviously, actually I should do my, arrow here. You can put a, like a Reebok step or a block under your hands for people who don't have as much mobility. So what this does is it takes away the need for going into possibly, end range lumbar flexion repeatedly. I do not think lumbar flexion is a bad thing, but anything done many, many times under high velocity or repeatedly, that could be detrimental. So I've done that I've made that modification to allow you to bring in more hips and a little less from the lumbar spine. And two, also bring a lot more lower body into the movement to get you moving, to increase the metabolic demand of it. I've got videos on this, yada, yada, yada. Now, in this same post, I reference a research study, just for people who want to see. I'm going to bounce back and forth between the study. This is the study, comparison and responses of two high-intensity intermittent exercise protocols. Yes, it was a small study here. It looks like it was like 11 or 12 people in the military, but this is not one of these studies that we're looking at like a vaccine trial here where it's meaningless. It looks at a physiological response, so you don't really have to have a lot of people for this. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go over the whole dang study. My main purpose of where I would use a burpee is the same reason I would use bike intervals or sprints, general conditioning exercise. The reason why I provided that context is because some people will say, oh, conditioning, it's not specific enough. It's like, well, why do you use bikes? You know what I mean? It's general conditioning, right? And then if people want to argue, well, the functional thing, right, where they say, well, it doesn't carry over to certain sporting movements, right? And, oh, it's not like a wrestling sprawl, that's a skill. I don't make those arguments. I think those are crappy arguments. Then I would say, well, then why do you have soccer players riding bikes? Why do you have tennis players doing chin-ups? They're not hanging from bars and getting on a bike, right? So clearly we agree that just because an exercise doesn't exactly mimic a certain movement or activity that's on the field or a sport in the play doesn't mean it doesn't have a positive carryover. Again, that logical consistency is a bitch kind of thing.
Right. You can have a transfer effect. I mean, that's why we're in the gym. Almost, you don't do most stuff in the gym in real life, but you do the stuff in the gym to hope that you can kick ass in real life.
Okay, so what they did in this study, again, I don't need to read the whole study for you, people can read it themselves, is they basically just compared cycling intervals with burpee intervals of similar time frame to see if they matched in demand, essentially.
Right.
So, and what they found, I'm going to read this paragraph here. The results of the study suggest the cardiovascular strain elicited by a single session of low volume, high intensity intermittent burpees may be sufficient to confer cardiorespiratory metabolic adaptations equivalent to those reported in studies using sprint interval cycling. So to me, I put it in the category of general conditioning, same category I'd put in a bike. So now the question would be, well, why would you choose the burpee over the bike, in what instances, right? Again, we'll get to the safety issue in a moment, and I will answer that question. So I'm letting you know where I would put it in a program. To me, I'd put it as conditioning.
Okay.
Now, I do want to scroll down because there is one other interesting finding in this study. And what they found was that I want to try to find it. Oh, I'm reading this paragraph here. Another important finding in this study was participants' perception of exertion were significantly different. Although self-reports range from hard to very hard and reported rating perceived exertion during both sessions characterizes the exercise intensity as vigorous, subject perceived the burpees exercise as easier. And so this kind of answers the whole people hate burpees. Yeah, well, they hate them. Sometimes they love to hate them. Other times they generally hate them. If somebody hates an exercise, don't do it, right? Again, nobody needs to do it. But if it's kind of that love to hate sort of thing, that's a very different argument, right? So the researchers suggested that basically, I'm going to kind of extrapolate a little bit, but they suggested that because the bike creates a little more local muscle fatigue on your quads, that's probably why they felt it more, because it just was that knife in the quads versus
just that burn, right?
Correct. Where the burpees were a little bit more spread the wealth a little bit.
Yep.
Right. So, I would say that's one of the beauties of the burpee is it brings in a lot of muscles at a time. And this is kind of speak to something else you put in your video, which we'll get to in a bit. Now, some people will argue, well, I don't want to steal your thunder on that one. So anyway, that's why I would use it. I just want to hear your thoughts on that because I've been running my mouth for a little bit.
I mean, I could certainly see the justification for that. I think for someone that could regulate their blood pressure really well, then, obviously the next thing that's really going to be working in a burpee is going to be cardiovascular fitness. So, it is going to get the cardio kicking. I would say that, my biggest kind of takeaway, or my biggest point, is that people should realize that the blood pressure is a very limiting factor for lots of people, not just a 70-year-old person, but for a lot of people.
100%.
And so you may not be able, if that person is like, especially if you have someone who's willing to work hard, who doesn't mind working hard on other exercises, and then it just seems like they just basically get out of sorts, when they do this exercise, then, generally look to choose something different. The other thing I would just say is in this study, they do the kind of what we would call the modern or the full burpee, which is, they do the push-up, they do the jump. So, that's naturally going to create even more of a cardiovascular load by really kind of hammering those, that whole system there, for better or worse. As you mentioned, I think they were in the military, well-trained subjects.
Sure. And then the point of this I was just bringing up was really just using it as a classification of a conditioning exercise.
Right. That's where I would label it, I would label as a conditioning exercise myself.
Okay. All right. So now, I'm going to cover 2 points here where this is kind of the logic and thing. In your video that you had sent me, and did you have that up on YouTube? Yeah. Okay. What is the title of the video so people can find it?
Burpees suck.
Burpees suck. Okay, good. I appreciate you.
So as you mentioned, you got to have a little bit of a little title to grab people's attention.
Sure. And what's your YouTube channel so people could find it?
It's a NPTI Tim 1.
Okay. So in that video, you had mentioned that and I've heard also other people like Mike Boyle make a similar argument. I'm not going to try to put words in anybody's mouth here, but so I'm only going to speak to yours because you're here.
Okay.
So
yep.
You had mentioned that one of the downfalls of the burpee is because it's a combination exercise, and I'll let you take it from there, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
Okay. So the burpee is a combination exercise. A combination exercise is when you combine, one or more exercises together. And so there are some pretty good combination exercises. The Olympic lifts are probably about as good as you can get, though they still have some flaws. And then there are some combination exercises that are quite silly. In the video, I mentioned like a dumbbell row going into a tricep kickback, because now the biggest issue is there's almost always one part of the combination that doesn't fit very well. And so in a burpee, it depends a little bit on how you do it. So like the burpee you kind of showed in the beginning, which is kind of to the push-up position and down, is kind of a little bit of a combination of like a hand plank and then a squat. And there's obviously in between. If you do kind of the more full or the traditional burpee, then you obviously have a push-up, you have a squat, and most people jump at the top. So you can kind of break those three down with the transition. And so my argument is, in general, with combination exercises, when given a choice, it's usually better to superset, which would be to take the elements that you feel are beneficial and then focus on that. And that way you can kind of have a more appropriate load. So if we were to compare the full burpee, right, which is all the way down, push up, squat, jump, I would rather see someone do like a little circuit or a longer superset of push-ups, which then can be adjusted, squats, which then can be adjusted, and some sort of a jump. Do that together, and my argument would be most of the time you'll get a better result.
Okay, cool. So I think those are all reasonable arguments. I would just add to it, my concerns with that is I would say the same three things that you would ask for any policy on anything, politics.
Okay.
You would ask, and this comes from Thomas Sowell, is as opposed to what, at what cost. And the first thing I would say is what context.
Okay.
So I'm going to grab context first. My concern with that argument, and I'm going to kind of provide my own counter argument here as well in the sense of fairness. My concern with that argument is, hey, it's not really beating up on any one area, and the stronger areas are getting neglected because there's the weak point. I totally get that if strength was the rationale for using it. But I already said that strength is not the rationale for using it. Conditioning would be.
Okay.
Now, we all know a general rule. So again, that's context. The general rule of conditioning is that more muscles worked, more energy expended. Am I wrong?
Nope.
Okay. So do we agree that if metabolic demand is the goal, I'm going to be more specific. Maximizing metabolic demand is the goal, not maximizing a hypertrophic response or a strength force production response at a certain joint, then maximizing as many muscles as you can at one time would be scientifically and common sense relevant. Yes or no?
If there weren't other limiting factors, yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so there's the context. There's how I'm taking the same idea of blending many muscles together, and I'm not really worried about is one getting hit harder than the other, right? Same thing with bikes. When we're on a bike, we love it for conditioning. We don't go, yeah, I don't say the bike sucks because it doesn't involve your upper body, or an Aerodyne is bad because you're hardly using your upper body. You go, but that's not what it's for.
Right.
So my concern with that sort of, argument is that it's in a way a straw man, because now it's basically saying the context should always be strength. And now therefore there's not as much force going through this joint than this joint. Therefore it's bad. And I'm saying, yeah, but that's the wrong context. All right. Now I will say that the counter argument to what I said is that, well, even if conditioning is the context, that you might get a more metabolic demand if you took your approach and you really did something intense for the lower body based on what the lower body tolerance is.
Right.
And you did something really intense for the upper body and you setted those together, or you did something added for the core as well and you setted that together. So I do not disagree with that at all. However, this goes to the as opposed to what and at what cost. At what cost of what? Your version takes 3 times as long as the burpee.
No, I wouldn't agree with that, because the burpee, for example, if you're going to do 20 push-ups and 20 burpees, right, the person's going to get through 20 push-ups probably in a third as long as it takes to do 20 burpees. And then you're going to do the squats, and then you're going to do the jumps. So it might take a little bit longer. I mean, we'd have to kind of see and test.
Add that up over multiple sets. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, so what it's not considering is the interest of time. And in many clients' scenarios, time is a factor, right? It also is a factor of, well, what else have I done? Maybe I've already done those other exercises as a part of a strength training workout, and now I'm trying to bring in some other element, right?
Okay.
As well, right? So again, it's not just, I get concerned that we get into these body, it's not just that, right? Now, there also is research that if you want to increase, that we have research on battling ropes and things like that, that less, basically incomplete recovery is more metabolically demanding. They did,
Okay, I would agree with that. Yep.
Yeah, we can apply that to other things too.
Sure.
So if you're going to try to maximize your intensity between exercises of strength, then you need to also increase the rest to maximize that set, which that longer rest break in between takes more time away from doing other things. Right. Or so it's the as opposed to what part that doesn't get considered in that argument that concerns me. Now I'm going to go back to a lot of clients I work with. Some of them want to have shorter workouts, right? Some of them get bored easy, right? Now we can start to get into other things now, but it's really about what people are going to do, right? what people like, what options they have. We have, we're all living in Coronaville now. They have minimal equipment at home. There's a lot of other aspects, to it than that. So my concern is not, all your arguments made sense. My concern is that maybe not you, but other people seem to not consider the other aspects of it. They don't consider the as opposed to what or at what cost. The at what cost is way more time. And then secondly,
well, I would push back a little bit on that. So let's say you've got a client and you want them to do burpees. So what would be a normal time frame you would have somebody do burpees for?
Well, I'll be as specific as I can. Because I put burpees as part of a conditioning for people I think that can do it with control.
Right.
We normally do them at the end of a comprehensive strength training workout as like a finish. And I understand some coaches hate that term. That's a different argument for a different day.
Sure.
But we could call it conditioning or whatever,
Right.
And we do it because it's fairly simple. It requires minimal equipment. We can thread it with other exercises where the goal is no longer to maximize force production. That would be strength training at the beginning. It's no longer to maximize hypertrophic responses or isolate certain muscles, which would be towards the middle of the session. This is general.
Right.
It would be more towards to maximize the metabolic demand, which is to use as many muscles as possible, minimize rest breaks.
Okay.
And the fact is I can also thread it together with other certain exercises.
Right.
If someone wanted an express type workout, the different context.
I just mean like in a specific set. Would you usually say like 30 seconds for burpees, or I mean, is that a fair example, or what do you like?
I can actually show you certain workouts that we do normally when we put them together. So we might do some sort of interval where, like, one example we'll do is I understand Tabatas weren't ever about fat loss. They were about elite level cyclists, and they were about, cardiorespiratory. I am well aware of the research on, but it's a really good interval. 20-10 intervals.
I like Tabatas. Yeah.
So when I say Tabata, all you smarty pantses out there understand that I'm well aware. I call it a Tabata inspired interval. Mm-hmm. So we'll do a certain interval, and again, for people who can do this, where it might be Gorilla Burpees for 20 seconds, 10 seconds off, like fast shadow boxing for 10 seconds, skips in place for 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and then maybe, some other fast shadow boxing or something like that. And then that would be 2 minutes, and we'd repeat that, right?
Okay.
So that could be one instance. Another instance, it may be threaded in some sort of little circuit, but no, we're not doing – I would never do them more than 30 seconds, and I don't think we'd probably ever do more than maybe 20 at a time. Okay.
I mean? So let's say we've got a 30-second, burpee interval, right? So my suggestion would be, like, just to go back to the kind of like time point of view, would be pick the one or two things. Like, so for example, if you're going to do the Gorilla Burpee, right, that's where you get into the push-up position, and then you kind of come back up. Right. Break that up and just say, okay, you're going to do 15 seconds of a bear crawl. Either just if the person's not ready, just lift up their hands and feet, move 5 feet forward, 5 feet back, whatever, and then just stand up and do 15 seconds of squats. And so the time there is the same. The general overall effect, kind of all would be about the same. You could thread that in with your circuits. So I don't think it's not going to necessarily be a huge time thing. And the fatigue, obviously, if you compare to 30 seconds of a Gorilla Burpee versus 30 seconds of push-ups, 30 seconds of squats, and 30 seconds of box jumps all in a row, right? That's not apples to apples. So I don't think that's a fair comparison. So we can either compare reps, right? So it could be 10 Gorilla Burpees to 10 bear crawls and 10 squats, or we could go by time, as long as it's the same. But I don't think the time has to change too much. So you can still sub it in. And obviously if it's super fast, but if it's super fast, if you only had 5 seconds, you're only getting 1 or 2 burpees in anyway.
Sure. So yeah, I would suggest people try that and see what you're saying. I would say they probably won't get the same metabolic demand because you're just going to get a lot of local muscle fatigue on your quads if you just did the squats. And, combining more muscles together is really what I'm looking for at that case. So I would just say don't trust either one of us on that. Test it.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm all about, right? Test it. Put it to the test, see what people think. Yeah, that's the joy of the gym.
Now let's take it to another one. One of the common arguments is, and I get this frustration, a lot of lazy trainers, they use it just to make people tired, or as punishment or all those things. So, and I would say, well, I'm not using that. So, I don't use it as that.
You were 10 minutes late, so 10 burpees. Let's
Yeah,
go.
it doesn't make the exercise bad. It makes the trainer bad. Now,
Right.
that being said, I mean, there's also people who've made people run laps and do push-ups until they're blue in the face. We don't blame push-ups. Now, what's interesting to me is again, not putting words in your mouth here. I'm just going to address some arguments that I've heard.
Sure.
Is they say like, well, you only use them because they're hard, and that means you're a lazy trainer. And I'm like, why do you do interval? I'm like, what happened to intensity? Like, I thought we're supposed to challenge people. Like, I mean, what if I just let people dog it the entire session? You would go, yeah, you're not going to get much of a response if you don't challenge them. And I'm going to say, oh, so you just want to beat people up. You're going to go, well, that's not fair. I'm going to go, that's what you're saying to me,
Right.
And I've also heard it the other way. I've heard when intervals started getting real popular again, the justification was, well, people are lazy, so they'd rather do 30 minutes on the elliptical at a valet jog pace.
Just an eeasy, steady state, right?
Yeah. At a valet jog pace versus 5 minutes of 10 seconds, ride it like just like you stole it pace, and then 50 seconds off and be done in 5 minutes because they're lazy. I was like, so wait a minute now. Like, people don't like intervals, but they should because they're good, because intervals are hard and they need to do more hard stuff. But burpees are hard, and that's your justification for why trainers suck for using them. I'm like, where's the consistency here?
Right.
Your thoughts on that one?
So I do think burpees are hard. So to me, it kind of goes back to that blood flow issue. So if you have someone who has really good control of their blood flow and their blood pressure, then burpees are just going to be hard because they're, a relatively hard activity.
Yep.
I guess my caveat to that would be, it's not that hard. So see if it seems like the fatigue is way out of proportion to what you would think. So in other words, if you have a person who could easily rock out 30 push-ups, could easily do 30 squats, could easily do 10 box jumps, but you give them 10 burpees and they're like, wandering around and don't know who they are, then they are probably struggling with that blood flow. For someone who's young, healthy, like we said, like a soldier, I've got a 14-year-old who's, getting super into fitness. I'm sure he could rock them out easy peasy. And, usually when you're young and your arteries and veins are working great, he could probably handle that. And then that's a kind of a cool challenge for him. And so it is hard. And so, yeah, obviously in general, we want to do things that are hard, right? It's working out. It's not easing out. Right. So we don't want to shy away from something that's hard. My question is always just, why is it hard? Right. And then is the kind of hardness what you want? Is that the appropriate level for your client?
Sure. I would say, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I would say all those qualifying factors are the same, with, barbell squats. You do barbell squats if you have the external rotation to put the barbell, well, obviously be specific, back squats.
Right.
If you have the external rotation to put the bar there, and if it doesn't hurt you, and you have the ankle mobility where it doesn't look like a Romanian, it doesn't look like a good morning, right? Unless you're trying to do a low bar squat or something like that. So again, we have all those sorts of things. I would say I train people based on their ability, not on their age. Of course, it's more likely if someone's 14, they're going to have more ability than if someone's 74.
Right.
But there are certainly people. I actually trained a lady who was in her 70s who her doctor said she had the bone density of like a 30-year-old.
Nice.
She was very fit. So I have some videos of her on my YouTube from 15 years ago. So I get what you're saying, but I don't want to just box it in and just say like, well, it's only for these younger, super fit people, because it kind of makes it sound like, it's a different exercise than any other exercise, but it's based on your ability, which some of that is also self-selecting.
Right.
It's also modifiable. Like I said, you can put it, especially my version, you can put your hands on something. So
right.
Then some people might say, I haven't heard this argument a lot, but I figure I would just deal with it and dismiss it right away. That they say, well, it's not a burpee anymore. Your burpee is different than other people. And I go, well, if I said squat sucked, you would say, well, what type of squat? And you also agree that you individualize squat stance, you individualize range of motion, you individualize weight placement. I just did the same thing with a burpee.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So again, it's that treat it differently sort of situation. Like when we say deadlift, we don't think one weight plate height, right?
Right.
We don't think even one implement. Could be trap bar, could be whatever. So
Yep.
that's all I did with that. Now, I do want to circle back to there are better options and sort of thing. And in this case, going back to that study if people want to look at that and say, well, why not choose the bike? The bike would be safer.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to address a couple things here. First, there's a difference between increased risk and risky.
Right.
You would
agree with that.
Now, I would not deny at all that doing even my version of burpees, even if you did them slow and all the other things, even if you walked them down and walked them up, would have more risk than being on a bike.
Right.
All right. That doesn't mean
a stationary bike.
that does. Yeah. Stationary bike. Yeah. Well, yeah. Good point.
Right.
Be specific. Yeah. That doesn't mean they're risky. Now, if we want to play it's more risky, therefore why take the chance? I challenge any trainer to look up. This has been published many, many times. Data's out there from emergency room statistics to research papers. The number one most common cause for emergency room visits from the gym are dropping weights on yourself. You know that. And it's a very high, like 60% of the emergency room visits or injuries from strength training drop weights.
Yep.
So I could definitely tell you that machines are far safer than free weights, but not a friggin' trainer on this planet would ever say they would take that exchange.
Right.
Right. So my question is that yes, because you realize that increased risk of free weights doesn't mean risky. That's exactly what I say with the burpees here. So again, the iron grip of logic. All right. So that's number one. Now, the question is, well, why not choose the bike? Even if we admit, here's my couple things. It goes back to the at what cost. Number one, maybe they've been using the bike for a while and they don't want to use the friggin' bike right now.
Sure.
Okay? So that might not be good enough for some trainers. I also have to have access to a bike, right? Which means maybe someone's got to buy the dang bike, right? Someone's got to store the bike. Even if you have all that, even if you say, well, Nick, you're kind of conceding that the bike is better, but you have to make all these investments. No, it also means I still have to involve another piece of equipment. Maybe it's at a different location at the gym. Maybe I want to string exercises together in a circuit and the bike's not, so there are pros and cons to all these things. And if we both agree, again, we have to go to the safety thing after this, right? When I say both agree, we'll have to get it through that. But
sure.
If it's come to the conclusion that, both can be done without much of a risk, then that's out. Then it really just comes down to all those other at what cost as opposed to what issues. So better choice is not just based on the one factors is what I'm getting at, right? Mm-hmm. I can find a million factors. Someone wants to do something at the office. They don't have a bike there, quick little metabolic, booster sort of situation. So that's my thoughts on that. Yours?
Yeah, I would say the way I look at it, the way I encouraged my students was to look at it was every exercise has a risk-reward ratio, right? There's no exercise that's perfectly 100% safe. So just the mere fact of moving is going to have some sort of risk that you have to weigh and decide. And then my kind of litmus test was, there's what we're going to call like perfect form. I'm generally looking for kind of good form. Yeah. If I feel that you're doing an exercise as well as you can, and in my opinion, you're still in unsafe form, then we're not going to do that exercise. So we're going to basically kind of look at that. But yeah, I think certainly burpees can be safe for some people. I wouldn't make the argument that they're, that they should be banned from the planet.
Cool. Appreciate you saying that. And we'll get to some of that stuff in a little bit. So I think the last, and you can catch me if I'm missing anything here. The other aspect of it is, so we covered the purpose, basically a metabolically demanding exercise that gets involves a lot of muscles. It could be very time efficient. Again, it's an option. You also propose some other options as well. So then the question would be what best fits the equipment availability, the time, the interest of the individual. And the reason why I say this is this comes down to my main concern about why I kind of stand up, it's probably not right to say stand up for burpees because, but I'm standing up for this thought process is because I care about trainers, and there's a lot of trainers that hear other really bright trainers out there, Mike Boyle of the world and people who are at, some football coach at some, high end college, football team. And, on one end, they try to go, they're very confused, right? Because they say, like, I'm just trying to learn, and I've been using this exercise, and my better judgment tells me it's fine. I don't see extreme ranges of motion. I don't see my client slamming the wrist down.
Right.
I follow all the general rules, but yet this person who I respect, is saying they're dumb. Like, so part of them, they have self-doubt because they're like, well, then maybe they know something I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But then the question is, well, then maybe I also don't know about this other exercise and this other exercise. And they start
Right. You can start questioning yourself to
they
death.
start second guessing everything. And that's not helpful.
Right.
Secondly, is that you start getting other people to judge what they do based off of some article that they saw, and they might not go give them business anymore because it erodes the trust. Because it's like, well, if you're wrong about this, then what else are you wrong about, right? So,
Sure.
and then, aside from that, so it's all about just thinking through it. And there's also a lot of trainers that go, no, that just doesn't fit my thought process. My other issue is that kind of what you said is taking it off the table. It's not that you have to do burpees, but there might be scenarios where when you consider the ability, the likes, and the environment and the time constraint, that may be the best option, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it gets the metabolism up. It can be done fast, minimal equipment. You can bang out a few sets of 15 or 20 in a controlled manner, get your heart rate up, boom, you're out. Maybe that's the context, right? And if somebody says that's off the table no matter what, now you're putting a trainer or a client in a really bad situation. It's like, well, I don't know what else to do.
Mm-hmm.
This person says a bike's better. Well, I don't have a bike. So
Sure.
now that my 10-minute little energizer workout that I was doing, I can't do. So either maybe I'm not going to do anything anymore, because I've seen this happen countless times with people, right? Where they just go, you know what, this thing's not for me. Every time I hear, hey, first eggs are bad, then eggs are good, then eggs are bad, then eggs are good. I don't know what to do. You know what? So I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to McDonald's and have breakfast.
Eggs are good.
Yeah, exactly right. But I'm saying this is the.
I know what you're saying. Yep.
So this is why I think it's important to do this, is because I care about what the other trainers that I see. I care about my friends who own a group training gym, who know what they're doing and put a tremendous amount of thought into it. And someone walking by and seeing them do burpees with everybody in a safe, controlled manner that they can. And then this person looking, go, well, I'm going to go in there because I read an article by some college coach that said they're dumb. So clearly those trainers don't know what they're doing.
Right.
I care about that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
I'd say it's kind of like, it's like the old fishing proverb, right? You give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. So we're trying to teach trainers how to think, how to evaluate exercises, how to weigh the pros and cons, and then how to decide what should be best for their clients.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, because they maybe don't have the mindset or experience or whatever, they, for whatever reason, don't, may feel a little intimidated or feel like they don't have the place to stand up and speak or whatever. And me, even when I was 18 years old and I went to conferences, I wasn't kissing anybody's rings. And there was a lot of times I looked at strength coaches up there. I go, I don't care what your resume is. You're fucking wrong on this one. Or you're,
right.
And some of them I'd look out there. I'm telling you, when I first went to conferences, I went, I literally went, okay, I'm learning some cool stuff, but is this the best the fitness industry's got? Because the critical thinking skills were, the comprehension, but that's my judgmentalness and ego is a different subject for a different day. So, all right. Do you have anything else that you think we can cover on, well, basically what I was saying, so I don't sound like I'm egomaniac here, is that the wrong way to go about things is kissing somebody's ring.
Right.
And it's not holding them to your standards. It's holding them to the standards of consistent logic, as you say. That's really what it comes down to.
Yep.
And that's all I meant. I meant that they failed a lot of times in the logic department.
Sure.
So do you have anything that you think we need to cover in regards to the efficacy, purpose?
I don't love how the overload factor of burpees. So if you tell someone to do 10 burpees and then you tell them to do 12 or 13, that's not a guarantee they're actually doing more work. They may have just gone a little longer. To me, the biggest negative is the rest position of standing is obviously pretty easy. Now, certainly, I do think a very astute and aware trainer can fix this, but I don't think it is fixed most of the time. So again, it's one of those where, a little bit like kind of the reverse of what you were saying, where it's there are options and good trainers can do it, but often it's not. I don't think it's programmed in super well. Whether you go for time or whether you go for numbers, there's a lot of ways to really not figure out what's going on.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I agree with you again. I have no doubt that it's not programmed well, but again, I just want to clear, and I know you're not.
That alone is not a reason to eliminate the burpee. You can say that about something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, there is no exercise that's not programmed well more often than the basic lifts. You know what I mean? It's interesting to me. A lot of people that are attacking the burpees like crazy, seem to just let it go by that you can walk into a gym at any day of the week and see. I understand pre-COVID. And see deadlifts and squats and bench presses, especially deadlifts and squats, butchered like crazy. And I'll tell you what, deadlifts and squats, even done well, are putting way more people in the friggin' hospital and surgery table than burpees are. So, but it's interesting to me that it seems to be, not driven hard as home as much. I don't like to judge, but I will. There is a part of me that thinks that a lot of this anti-burpee is just a passive aggressive way of strength coaches to say they hate CrossFit without saying it anymore, because it's not as cool to say you hate CrossFit. So now they've kind of found out a different way to say it. You know what I mean? I won't judge people on that until, but when I see all their arguments don't hold up and it seems to be motivated reasoning, right? Like burpees suck because they're commonly done bad. Well, why do you do chin-ups? Why do you do deadlifts? I don't do deadlifts because they're commonly done bad. You would go, well, Nick, you're dumb. Just that's how you coach it. And I go, okay, that sounds like you're finding reasons not to do burpees. You're finding reasons to do deadlifts because you don't like burpees. You started with the conclusion and now you're backing your way into it. So to me, when I see motivated reasoning like that, I think, what is the motivation? You know what I mean? And I get the frustration. They're sick of seeing people just beaten down by burpees. It just seems to be, so, okay. Now the overload thing, I thank you for saying that, because I would have neglected to say that. I have heard that. I've seen strength coaches say, you can overload them or whatever. So the obvious one is you do more, but at any exercise, I would say there's an upper limit to that, right? I mean, there'd be a point at which you'd be like, Nick, do you really need to make them do more reps of deadlifts? I mean, they're already doing this, so we could, again, we said that about anything. If we're going to just talk about adding weight, there's the ways to create overload is you change lever arm, you change speed, obviously you change reps and change resistance. So it's not just, or change base of support. So my two favorites are just to add load. We'll have them hold dumbbells and do the Gorilla Burpee. And now that serves as a elevated hand position.
Nice.
And we use the Hex dumbbells so they don't flip flop and roll. I definitely don't use kettlebells for that because it's easy for the kettlebells to just, roll out on you or your hands to slip. And of course, I do not use round dumbbells for that because round dumbbells is just a wrist roll waiting to happen. Or it seems to be a lot of people have forgotten about weight vests. So
weight vests probably the best. Yeah.
I'm a big weight vest fan. And the other thing is too is, again, if you string it in as part of something else, right? So, you add in a little fatigue element. And again, this goes back to, I think where a lot of people got concerned with some of the early stuff with CrossFit, and CrossFit is coach specific. There's a lot of bad NSCA trainers, just like there's a lot of good ones. So I'm not going to blame it, but they associate those two things together where, we really have to pay attention to detail when you start getting into conditioning, because conditioning is, in a simple terms, it's fatigue resistance, right? So in order to get people better at being resistant to fatigue, what do you have to do? You have to elicit fatigue. So you have to train people in a fatigue state, right? So, but again, it just comes down to monitoring quality of movement, not just more. So I would also say overloading them is not necessarily doing more, but then you could stack them with another exercise. You can stack them with a farmer carry, whatever. We could go about that. And that's actually kind of how I prefer to use them.
Okay.
The reason why I like to use them that way is it also minimizes the volume per burpee that we get. Right.
Yep. And that would help the whole blood flow thing, which would be good.
Yeah. Correct.
I would say for any of the trainers out there watching, personally, I'm not a huge fan of things being programmed for time, because that actually, if you just tell a client, like, you're going to do push-ups for 30 seconds and you don't really monitor them. And, I like to work out, but when I get tired, I have a lazy side that's like, dude, take it easy. So if I rest for 10 seconds in the up position, the time is still ticking. I'm basically rewarded for resting. So my suggestion would be, if you were going to do push-ups or burpees or any of those exercises, maybe when the client's fresh and motivated, right? They say 30 seconds, you count how many they got in that first time. So let's say they get 10. Then you say, okay, in the subsequent rounds, do 10. Because if you just keep saying, go do this for 30 seconds, do this for 30 seconds, people will just kind of rest and they'll actually be doing a little less than they should. And you don't want to incentivize lack of effort.
I couldn't agree with you more. You know what I thought people might enjoy here? I was actually getting ready to do I'll do a screen share here again. I will actually show some of my templates.
Nice.
For them here. So I do want to show two things here. Let me go back to the screen share. And share that. Share. Can you see that all right, Tim?
I can see it pretty well, yeah.
Okay, all right. This is all part of my PPDM program. These are 12 finishers, my top finishers that we use here. And I want to see if I can find one. Okay, so here I can't get into what these different days mean. That's
Sure, that's fine.
My practical program design mastery. But if people sign up for my practical program design mastery, this is one of the things that you'll get for our finishers. So if we look at this finisher here on endurance day, so it's a little dumbbell complex. So we do, when I say rounds, it's a rep. So this entire sequence from 1A to 1G is one round.
Got it.
And then you do 15 to 20 rounds, we say for time. But the reason why for time is I always tell people, it's not a race. I always want good quality, and we monitor them.
Right.
But we have two dumbbells. So we do a dumbbell swing. There's a reason why it's not using a kettlebell, because we're going to go down to the burpees. So you do 3 swings. That goes into the down part of the Gorilla Burpee, which means hands down, dumbbells on the floor, feet back. Now you're in that push-up position with your hands on the dumbbells, kind of like if you were to do a renegade row. I remember one of my clients was like, renegade row? What's renegade about? And I was like, yeah, you're right, it's plank rows. That's a story from like 20 years ago. So then you do what we call a slow motion mountain climb, which is basically, we're not jumping. It's just a strong hip, you pull the knee in, keep everything nice and strong. We do 3 per side, so it's like at this tempo, right? Mm-hmm. Then we do a plank row, 1 on each side. So obviously the weight that we choose allows them to make sure that they keep their spine very straight and flat through the whole time. Then after that, they do the up part of the Gorilla Burpee. So they jump their feet on the outsides of the dumbbell, get their butt down, kind of get their back as strong as possible. They come up, stand up, and then we just call it a power curl because the weight's pretty heavy. So we just kind of do like a cheat curl.
Power curl, I love the curls.
Like the worst version of a clean, the clean that
right.
Without using their lower back too much. And then we do kind of a partial squat, to a press, or we'll just do a front squat if they can't do that overhead. So that would be 1 rep.
That sounds cool. Yeah, I like that. That's a cool setup. I also like how you're giving people time to kind of acclimate with that blood flow by spending time in that sort of position.
Now, here on this one here, I'll just show you one more. This is I said this before. Maybe I'll show you 2 if we have it. There we have it's not for fighters. We just call it by fighters because it just kind of seems like that. So 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. We say as many as you can do in control. Follow your pace. Obviously, if people start trying to race, their form goes to crap. And I say, no, you got to slow it down. Control, control, control. So we do Gorilla Burpees, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. Real quick, short speed air punches across the body. It's basically like a rotation type movement, but really short and tight. Bob and weave, fat. Those we do quick. I mean, boom, 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 boom.
Right.
So you're pulling yourself down faster than gravity will take you there. And then speed, uppercut, bah, bah. I mean, fast, hard, short movements. So the effort is high, the range of motion is low. That's 2 minutes, 1A through 1D, and then we do that two times through. That would be 4 minutes.
Nice.
So cool. Let me see if I can find another one here.
Oh, here, scroll back up for 1 second. I just wanted to give you a shout out. So if anybody at home doesn't use your NT loops, I've got a pair of those. I use them with clients all the time. They're pretty awesome. So definitely check those out.
Oh, appreciate that, brother. Thank you for saying that. Let me see if I have one more I can show. We have another, some of these will repeat. Oh, wait a minute, here's one. Okay. So we call this, so look at one right here. Again, I don't want to get into what we mean by the Green Day power.
Right,
they have to take the course for that. But so we call this a 20-20-10 leg complex, 1 to 2 sets, 2 minutes between sets. So here would be a set. So you have your NT loop around your shoulders and under your feet. So it's basically a band resisted squat, just a band. I don't mean with a barbell and bands around the barbell.
Right.
You do 20 as fast as you can go. You don't really need the band. You can pop the band off. You can keep it. You do an ISO hold. So it really crank those quads on you. And then we hit 10 gorilla burpees. So 20, 20, 10.
Okay.
So that one starts to really accumulate more local muscle fatigue on the quads. And it's a one way we overload burpees without actually doing more burpees.
I was just saying, so do you have the NT loop while you're doing the gorilla burpee?
No, we abandon that, and then you do no, we wouldn't do that at all. So again, I want to give some real practical examples for that. Now, I want to show just one other thing here. So stop that share, and I got one other little share I want to do. I just got to switch the share here. Safari. And what I want to share is this one. So what I want to demonstrate is, you and I obviously care about deductive reasoning and having a consistent thought process. Again, not motivated reasoning, right? Do I apply the same filter when I say is bench press good? Is it going to go through the same logical and come out the other side, or am I determined? Am I using two different filters depending on my bias, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote this article and I'm not trying to do this to be self-gratifying. Hey, check me out. I just want people to understand how I think. So I wrote this for the NSCA Personal Trainer Quarterly. It's been peer reviewed, and then I later published it on my website, principle-based program design. And all I'm really doing here is we all know these same four main principles: specificity, individuality, overload, and variation. What I propose in this article is that they're not just four individual, or at least how I use them, principles, but they actually kind of work in establish one, and if you establish one, it informs the other. So if you use them in this order, you kind of funnel things down, right? Yeah. So let me apply burpees to this. So I first look at burpees and I go, what would they be specific towards? Now, I don't mean specificity in terms of like, what movement does it mimic? Because we've already established, get generally athletic, general fitness, right? So I don't mean that. What I just mean is like, is it more for maximizing metabolic demand? Is it more for maximizing a hypertrophic response? So on and so forth. Is it more for maximizing strength, right? So of course I go, no, it's more for maximizing metabolic demand, right? Includes many muscles, but doesn't overload any one more than the other. So, okay, so it's good for that. And then I go into, so now it's on the table for that if we know conditioning is something that I need for this individual, right? Maybe a finisher. Okay, now we funnel down next. Now that we know that's on the table, right? And I know that if I'm not looking for conditioning, then I know that heavy barbell deadlifts are out for the context of conditioning, right? So it's eliminating variables and bringing in things. Now I say, what can this individual do, right, with their current ability and their environment? Which means, do you have the mobility to get down there? Do you have the balance to do it? Do you have the blood pressure issues? Does it make you dizzy? When we put you on the Aerodyne bike, if you're getting dizzy doing intervals there, I'm certainly not going to have you do burpees, right?
Right.
So that's A. Second is, what does their environment dictate? Okay, they're working out at home when they're not with me. What equipment do they have? Well, they don't have a bike at home. They're in their basement. They don't have a high ceiling. Okay, so jumps are out, yada, 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 right? So now we bring it further. Okay, they can do, burpees with control. They don't have heart rate, or blood pressure issues. They don't have a bike, right? And they can't go out all the time because sprinting, a lot of people pull hamstrings sprinting and the weather's bad. So now I got burpees as an option there. Then the question is, how do I overload it? So basically what it is, it's a funnel. So that's how I think, and that's how I apply everything to what I do, just so people understand.
I think that's a great way to look at it. That pretty much encourage my students to do almost the exact same thing.
Appreciate that, brother. Okay, so now we can move on, as long as you're cool with it, to basically the big one is, is it safe, right?
Right.
We covered the is it purposeful, is it safe? So I'll just turn it over to you, and what are your main concerns with the safety? pieces of it.
So yeah, so we talked about it a little bit at the beginning. You know, the basic idea is that your blood in your body is a liquid, and it's stuck inside a closed container. You hope it's a closed container, and it will behave as a liquid. There's nothing magical in your body that always keeps, you know, blood next to your brain or keeps blood in your calves or what have you. And so one of the issues, and I think we almost came at this from kind of two different points. As you know, as I'm chatting with you, I feel like your kind of approach is burpees have been kind of getting shit on, pardon my French. And so you feel like, you know, hey, it's time that they get a little bit of love, and you talk about some of the good things about them. I guess my approach would be burpees have been used too much and they should be used less. So I'm a little more comfortable doing the shitting. And so the other issue with the burpee is it's, you know, we talked about, for example, like say someone tries to squat, and obviously, you know, we say individual variation. What if they don't have the shoulder mobility? What if they don't have the ankle dorsiflexion? The squat is a visual thing that you can see. At least a trained eye can generally see, okay, you're not going to be able to squat. The idea here with the blood pressure is it's hidden. You can't see this. And honestly, I think some trainers just aren't aware of how the blood vessels work. So my mission was to try to kind of bring that a little bit more to light, and just to make sure that trainers were aware of this is, you know, there's not that many exercises that replicate this specific up and down motion, especially if you just look at a classic burpee without any rest, or, you know, you kind of intelligently programmed them with lots of other things in that zone. But if you just have an idea, okay, you're going to do 30 burpees, you're going to rest 30 seconds, you're going to do 30 burpees, you're going to rest 30 seconds. You're basically just slamming that person's blood up into their head and then down into their body, up into their head. And especially when you do squats and jumps, you also force blood down to the legs. And so these baroreceptors in your carotid artery are opening and closing and opening and closing. And it's almost like doing the blood flow restriction with something around your neck. And so for a lot of people, that's even more than your super classic 75-year-old who, you know, can't get up off a chair. That's going to be an issue. And I just want to make sure that trainers are aware of that, and that they know that's what I'm training, right? That baroreceptor response. And I'm also training cardio. If they can check off both of those two things and they still want to do burpees, then they're informed, educated. I'll give them a high five. But if they didn't have any idea that was going on, then that's why I wanted to make my point.
Well, yeah, and I know you understand this, but to clarify, you know, you're not really shitting on burpees, and I'm not saying that they need to get more love. What you're shitting on is misuse, and what I'm dealing with is I'm saying your real arguments, you as the general you of all the people who are against burpees, are really not against the exercise or against misuse. My issue is that why not we talk about what good programming is, because it applies to all exercises. But you're creating, again, you, the general you, not you personally, when you say burpees suck, all you're going to do is just get people just to use the same shitty reasoning on some other exercise. They're just going to eliminate burpees, you know? So that doesn't solve the problem at all, because again, it goes back to the 2 + 2 = 5. Just remember 4.
Right.
You're not teaching someone how to do addition anymore. Right. So it's just like, what happens when they have to add 3 + 3? You know, it's like you haven't changed their thought process. That's A. B is that it lets a lot of people, it's all what people hear. It's that, well, when people hear that, they're going to judge other people as good or bad, and knowing things or being in the know or being negligent based off of that one thing. And that's just not because they don't know how to deduce it themselves anyway. So like I said, it's my reason why I defended it. It's not defending burpees, it's defending the thought process behind it, and the thought process against demonizing an exercise for the problem, the way people use it. You know, that's my thing. And that's why I say it really is funny to me how, you know, trainers like, oh, well, you just, you know, just because you love burpees, or you're only arguing about burpees. I'm like,
Nick's the burpee guy. That's what you want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. You know, I get that's kind of the, you know, the soundbite world we're looking in. And I'm just like, man, you know, but I know sure as heck if one of your clients came to you and said a doctor told you that squats are a bad exercise, you would, and if you came back to me and you were, you know, online complaining about how the doctor's confusing your clients and keeping them from doing squats, and they say, well, you got to sit on toilets, the doctor's dumb. And the doctor might say, well, I don't mean 1 or 2 times you get up and down. I mean with weights repeatedly.
Sure.
Right? And you're still going to go, well, yeah, but maybe this is keeping you from doing an exercise that you found beneficial for a long time. You would be concerned for your clients. This is now consumer efficacy, consumer protection.
Right.
But when someone else does it, they're just the burpee you know what I mean? So, but this is the world we live in, right? It's like George Carlin used to say, everybody that's going slower use an asshole, but everybody's going faster than use a shit.
An asshole too, right?
So that's how it is. Okay. So we covered, most of the safety issues. And again, I think you bring up the best argument I've heard with the blood pressure thing. And I would say some of that would probably be kind of self-selecting. People have probably already figured they get dizzy at certain things, but also some of it would be from abuse of people when they do too much of it, where it's like, just push through it, you're in bad shape. But again, this goes back to negligence of common sense.
Yep.
So, actually know what might be good to do? Let's do this before we get into some of the other ones. I want to cover some of what I think are also bad reasons to do burpees. And I'll back up a little bit into the efficacy thing. People say, well, this is, how you teach people how to get up, or it's like fall prevention. I'm like, well, I don't know about that. I don't really think that's how you would, fall. And in fact, I'm not teaching people to fall in a burpee.
Just fall in a push-up position.
Themselves. Yeah. I mean, if you fall, that might be a broken wrist. So that one I don't necessarily get. I do get that there's some athleticism, having to control yourself back and land lightly, with your feet.
Yep.
I get that. So you could say there's some general, almost like a basic gymnastic exercise that you don't need to have special gymnastic ability to do. I get. When people might then they start trying to get sport specific with it. Well, it's like a wrestling sprawl or whatever. It's like, okay, well, it kind of is, but the question there is like, people don't ever lose wrestling matches because they get too tired from sprawling. You know what I mean? So, it's you get a lot of that in practice. There's a certain skill with your hips there. So again, it's more of a conditioning exercise that wrestlers can do in a room where they got 100 wrestlers at mats. They don't have a lot of equipment.
Right. They don't all have 100 bikes. Right.
As a conditioning exercise, sure. But so I would say that's not a good argument. All those sort of get up and get down sort of things, or teach people how to get off the floor. Well, yeah, I get that, but that would be also, if you're older, you could walk them down, where you go 1 foot, then the other foot, and then 1 foot, then the other foot, right? I call that a segmented burpee, right?
Okay.
But it really doesn't look anything like a burpee. You're just kind of coming down, you end up in that plank or sometimes all fours position, and you
right.
So I think there's something to be said there, but I think we're starting to get into the again, it's kind of tough at that point where it's like, yeah, but I don't know if somebody needs to. Really, if your goal is to get up and off the floor, you would find lots of different ways to get people to get up. You would say, okay, put your hands off this table and get up from that way,
Sure.
Get all the way down, So I don't know, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I generally agree with everything. If people are interested in getting up off the floor, one, I would just make sure trainers are aware of something called the sitting rising test. Which actually has one of the best links to mortality among any test there is for older adults. You just have somebody sit down, get up, and you count how many points of contact they need. Right. And some clients just need to be kind of taught, or maybe they learned it, but now it's been so long, how do you get off the floor? My wife can just plop down on her ankles and then stand back up. I'm too inflexible for that, so I kind of need to at least use 1 point of contact, which is fine. But for health, if somebody needs 6, 7 things to kind of climb up, that's not good if they're older. And so the nice thing is good, proper fitness programming would really help that out, and especially with some good instruction from a trainer.
Right. That was a Brazilian study, if I remember correctly, wasn't it? It was Brazilian?
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
Yeah. Can you, for people who aren't familiar with that, can you say what the baseline of like points of contact are that might be put them at someone at a higher risk?
Sure. So you just have someone take off their shoes, stand in a kind of, a safe area with a carpet. You instruct them to get down on the ground and close to Indian style or crisscross applesauce for the young kids out there. And then they stand back up. You start with a base of 10. And any point of contact other than your feet or ankles, you lose a point on the way down and on the way up. So for example, if I have to go down to my one knee, like a reverse lunge, then I sit down, then I put my hand on the ground, and then I come up, that would give me a score of 8. And so basically 7 to 10 is low risk, you're fine. 4 to 6.5 is kind of medium risk, and you got something to worry about. But if you get a score of less than 4, then that's very problematic. And I'm going to forget the stats right off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that those with a score of less than 4 were 10 times more likely to die in the next 5 years than the people in the low risk category. This is for people tested with older adults. There's a pretty good YouTube video. If you just type in sitting rising test, it's like a 4-minute video. It goes over it. You can lose a half point for balance too if you kind of stumble.
Yeah, I agree. That is a very underutilized, assessment. It's very simple to do, safe, so and well evidenced. So very cool bringing that up. All right, so let's bring up some other. We probably will agree on these now. Again, we're going to the safety issue. You brought up obviously the one with the blood pressure. We kind of covered that, where
Right.
we would look at it as other exercise. If someone gets dizzy on any particular exercise, it probably means they don't. It's probably off the list.
Right.
until further notice. So again, still goes in that category of this is how we would apply it to any other exercise, right?
Right. I would just say it's much more common that that'll happen with a burpee.
Well, sure. Yeah. So, and it goes back to the same thing, every exercise, because it's kind of like, as they say, its strength is its weakness, because it's so demanding, you get up and down, you have that flip side. It's kind of like,
Right.
It's much more common for people to hurt their back doing deadlifts than it is doing, shoulder.
Because you're actually working your back. Right.
Correct. You know what I mean? So again, it's just that kind of thing. Okay. Now, some of the other issues that people bring up, and I think we'll probably agree on most of these, but let's try to get as much as we possibly can, make this as comprehensive as possible. So I hear several issues with the wrist. Where it really comes down to 2. One of them is they say you're slamming your wrists down. The other one is that it's, too much wrist extension, right? So I'll cover half, and I'll let you cover half.
Sounds good. I'll take either one, whichever one you
cover
want.
the wrist extension part. It's no more wrist extension than a push-up or a bear crawl, and it's interesting how the majority of the strength coaches I've seen that say, it creates too much extension at your wrist are the same ones who do push-ups and bear crawls.
Right.
So I'll let you pick up on
Yeah,
that.
and then with the slamming, to me, I think there's a lot of things you could do. Obviously, you could coach someone not to slam. Now, it's true if you're forcing them to do just as fast as you can for 20 seconds, they may be more tempted to drop down. I think like a yoga mat or something, non super slick would really help if somebody wanted to use a little cushion. If somebody can't do the extension that you mentioned, you could have push-up handles, dumbbells, something like that to hold on to. If somebody wanted more intense, they could do knuckle version like a fighter. So I think that's totally in the programming, and I don't really think that's a fair criticism. You could even try to change surface, like if your gym had a hardwood floor and a turf, my guess is it's going to feel softer to do it on the turf than the hardwood floor.
Sure. And what I encourage anybody to do if they've listened this far into it and they're actually still paying attention is
Right.
I like to think we've kept this entertaining and I would say
we're ripping our shirts off at the end, so ladies,
at least substantial,
Right.
So what I would say is this: I encourage you to, anytime you're analyzing your own arguments, and always point the finger inward before you point it at other people. When it at least comes to an exercise, is plug in another exercise and see if it still fits. Again, that's to see if the algorithm you're saying is the same, which we would say is logical, consistent, because that's what you want. So what I would say is that if I came to you, I'm talking to you, the audience member, the general audience member, and I said, squat jumps are a bad exercise. And you said, well, why? And I said, well, my main reason is because people land too hard. You would say, well, that's because you have some people who shouldn't be doing squat jumps. And the people who could do them, you've got to teach them to land lighter. And I would say, same thing with burpees, going down the wrist.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, who says everybody's slamming themselves? And if you try it and you coach them up and they can't stop slamming themselves, even if you elevate their hands, you do things, you just say, not the right exercise for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's plain and simple. So,
yeah, I totally concur. You got to have the same litmus test for a variety of different exercises. You can't just apply one on one and forget about it on another one.
Yeah. I did see in the article that, and it was by Mike Boyle. It was like why burpees are the dumbest exercise or whatever. It was in like Women's Health or Men's Health. It came out a couple of years ago. Now, granted, I know how these articles work. You interview with somebody and they edit it and they write it a certain way. So I'm not going to say this would be directly how Mike would say it, and he's not here to say anything. So I'm not going to but in the article, it basically also covers something about the shoulders and basically says, it puts undue force on the stress on the shoulders. That is part of the article. So I'm not going to say this is what Mike says exactly. This could be some, changes from the editor there. I believe me, that's happened to me many times.
Yep.
You
You and me
know,
both.
but we will address it because it is out there and it is associated with a very, a coach that I have great respect for, who's had a lot of accomplishments in the field. So I would also have the same counter argument is like, well, no more stress on the shoulders than a push-up or a heavy bench press or other exercises.
Less than a heavy bench press. Yep.
I would say less. Yeah, exactly. Even less so. So,
Yeah, I don't think a criticism of burpees is too much pressure on the shoulders is fair.
yeah, got you. And then I would say the other one in that same article, again, I'm going by what the article says. I can't say that's exactly what Mike said. It's the editor's interpretation of it. Is that they said something like it's trying to be 3 exercises at once, but it doesn't do all of them all that good.
Right.
It kind of goes back to what we've already talked
Yeah,
about.
we kind of talked about that. Yep.
Right. So I think we've kind of addressed those. Do you have anything else that you may have heard that you think is a good argument or bad argument in regards to mechanics, forces, all that kind of stuff that you're like, man, it's not really a good argument to not use burpees?
No, I mean, I've tried to convey kind of hopefully a slightly new point for people that weren't aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, my point, to summarize, I would simply say that I do feel like from my observation of trainers and, kind of the fitness world in general, burpees are overused. I would generally kind of, ask yourself, what's the purpose? As you mentioned, it's going to be cardiovascular and it's going to be the ability to control that blood pressure. So
Right.
if you're trying to check those 2 boxes, then I would say, yep, you probably came up with a good exercise. If you weren't aware of one of those, or if you're trying to do something like power or something like that, unless you've got a really creative way of doing it, you're probably missing the boat. And so, and then also ask yourself with any exercise, is there a better way to do it? And then kind of run it through all the litmus tests that you've kind of listed and I concur with, where, what can we do to make it better? You even had, like you were showing your spreadsheet of ways that you improved on it. And so I think people can learn from that. People can apply. Trainers, do the shit yourself before you make a client do it. So, so you can kind of understand and empathize what they're going on with, and then see if it's still something that you want to incorporate.
Very well said. And I'll kind of, close up with some broader points as well, because what you brought up was broader points about decision-making processes and exercise selection. So I'll say this. One thing is kind of specific to burpees, but it'll open up to a larger point. What's really interesting, I started to see this with some other exercises like crunches or whatever, where someone will attack an exercise and then I go, okay, if you could be right. I mean, if you might know something I don't know, I want to know. I don't want to put my clients in harm's way. So what are the reasons, right? Basically, I'm saying, show me your work, right?
Yep.
And maybe you think about something I'm not thinking about. And then they give me the reasons and I'm like, yeah, sorry, your reasons aren't nearly measuring up to your claim, right?
Right.
And then they'll turn around and go like, well, why do you care about burpees so much? I'm like, I'm not the one who brought this shit up. So It's almost like this flip that they try to, play. It's like, well, why are you defending them so much? I was minding my own business, and they were just one exercise in a multitude of other options that I would use my decision-making process to come to.
Right.
You're the one that singled them out and basically said, there's no reason these should ever be the general you again. They should never be used. And, to me, I want to know why you say that, and so it's interesting how a lot of people kind of flip that over. It's like, well, why are you being closed-minded? I'm not the one who said you can't be wrong by saying, they're stupid,
right.
Because the implication is if they're dumb, you're basically saying anybody who uses it, you're not necessarily calling us stupid, but you're saying anybody who uses it is not considering the things that I'm considering.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So there is an implication there. So, that's why I, bring it up. To me, it is still just an exercise as an option. All I'm saying is that it can be a viable option if you use the decision-making processes that we are talking about. Can people do it? Can they do it in control? Are you just doing it just to punish people versus, yes, it's okay to make people tired, but that doesn't mean more is better, right? That's the overused situation sort of thing.
Yep.
So the last thing I'll just say is this, I don't like to try to tell people what to do, but I would just say what I try to do is be a lighthouse, not a courthouse, and what I say, that's my concern with some of these this exercise is dumb, sort of things that go beyond the title of the video. I definitely get the title of the video stuff. I'm definitely just as guilty of all those fancy titles, sexy titles. Is that anytime you see a trainer doing something different than you, whether they approach a discussion differently than you, whether they approach an exercise differently than you, whether they're doing an exercise that you've been told or learned or think is dangerous or whatever, the arrogant way is to assume you know something that they don't and they need to get on your level. The humble way is to say, maybe they know something I don't, right? Just because I can't think of it doesn't mean that it is not, there are other options out there. Maybe they've read a book I've not read. They've read a research that I've not read. So we should seek to have conversations with those folks. Now, the way to open up dialogue is not throw slime. The way is to be humble when you're communicating, right? Because I'm definitely the type of person who hates when someone thinks that just because I put something on social media means I owe them an explanation for anything, right? If I'm just trying to share my thing for you to take it or leave it, that's what my courses are for. You want more, you got to pay for it. That's life.
Right.
But if I'm going to make a claim, it's different for me to say, hey, my opinion, the way we do it in my gym with my clients, we don't like this. We think this is overused. Here's why. I made no claims. I simply made sure you understand this is my opinion. I basically just told you, if you come to my house, we don't like Hawaiian pizza. That's what I said. But as soon as I say anybody who eats Hawaiian pizzas, or Hawaiian pizza is a bad food for you.
Yep.
You're going to say, well, wait a minute. Do you mean some sort of combination when you add that pineapple with it mixed with the cheese, it has health parameters? Like you got to give us some more here now. As soon as you say that, you've made a claim.
Right.
And that does deserve justification. And when you make that sort of claim, you are being arrogant because you're basically just saying, there's no way I could be wrong about this.
Sure.
So that's my advice is just the way to elevate the field is to have conversations like this, sure, but to be humble like you are about things. You're not someone out there who's putting themselves out this way. And understand that, we very much could be wrong, even if you have strong feelings about certain exercises, and try not to judge people as, well, that means you do that means you're a bad trainer because you're not on my level, So I'll let you have the last word on that one, man, and we'll close it up.
Sounds good. Well, one, I would just totally echo what you just said. I was, I think you described it as eloquently as I could. If you are a trainer in the field, particularly, well, really with any level of experience, but I think it's a little more common with the young trainers, is, don't assume that you necessarily know more than someone in the gym. And always, great conversation starters. Hey, what's your goal with that exercise? Well, what are you trying to accomplish? Give the person the benefit of the doubt. Assume they do know something. If they open their mouth and it's pretty clear they don't have any idea, then you can be, I guess, a little more smug in your judgment if you want to go that road. But certainly don't just, decide for them, and don't let somebody, defend or justify their positions and why they're doing something. And so I appreciate you bringing me on. I thought it was a fun discussion. I hope the third-party viewers out there enjoy it. And certainly if they have any more questions, I know I'm available. You're always on Facebook and other platforms, so it'd be fun to to answer any deeper things.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for all you continue to do for the field, and thanks for being willing to do this. I mean, it lets me know you are a very passionate guy and you put a lot of thought into it. And I hope people who really care about this, the fact that we can sit here and talk 2 hours or however long we've been talking here now, I can't see my timer, over an hour, shows how much thought someone can put into literally one exercise. And again, it's not just burpees, it's all the thought leading into an application of how you're using it and how much and all those things. And that's what separates the people who are movers and shakers like yourselves and writing books and teaching and pushing things forward and having people stand on their shoulders, and the people who are just kind of, oh, whatever you say, I'll kiss the ring. You say don't do this now, I'll do that now. Whatever you say, you know what I mean? It's like there is a lot of thought that you got to put into it, and I hope people see that. So,
well, thank you, and keep up your awesome work as well.
Appreciate you, brother, man. Talk soon.
Take care.